So yeah, in a perfect world, we should not have to have these remedies. We shouldn't have to have Section 2 to deal with discrimination. But we know that in 2026, discrimination not only is alive and well, it has been resuscitated by this president who seems to think that creating hate speak and to create further divisions among people is what a president should do. Mr. President, no, that is not what you should do. You should unify.
Okay, so you're looking at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial here in Washington, D.C. today as we mark a day to not just remember the life and legacy of the civil rights leader, but a day to live out Dr. King's message of service. Former President Barack Obama put it this way: Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. dedicated his life fighting for equity and justice. He taught us that even in the face of intimidation and discrimination, we must never stop working towards a better future. A lesson that feels especially relevant today. Joining me now is Louisiana Democratic Congressman Troy Carter. He's also the vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Enjoy being with you.
Typically, this is a day where people might be able to enter national parks for free because it's a federal holiday, nodding to this hero. The president has revoked that. Instead, you can go in free on his birthday. But it's part of a wider sort of shift, getting rid of anything DEI, getting rid of anything that historically references many black figures. Were these symbolic moves, or do you feel like it makes a difference in a way?
It makes a huge difference because when you think about Dr. Martin Luther King and you think about the gains that we've had and the recognition of the work that he did for a better United States and a better world, a world that would see people and include people and create opportunities for people. Now we have a president who wants to roll all of that back, a president that somehow sees words like diversity, equity, inclusion as bad words. A president that seems to think that recognizing someone who stood for justice and equality is not a good thing. The president has made it very clear that his Project 2025 is a well thought out, evil plan to reverse the gains of humanity, to disregard the Constitution, to disregard the tenets of the struggles of the 60s, the Voting Rights Act, health care for individuals, opportunity for people to be educated. This president seems to think an attack on our democracy, an attack on the very people that our country has owed a great debt of gratitude to, is something that is a good thing to do.
But Congressman, can I jump in here because you have the Supreme Court also weighing in on these issues, especially like the Voting Rights Act. And the reason why I jump in is because a lot of what they say, they sometimes point to King's words, right? The idea that eventually the U.S. must reach this promised goal of sort of race neutrality. And this has been the argument backing things like gutting the Voting Rights Act. I want you to listen to something that Justice Brett Kavanaugh said during arguments over, I think it was a case involving your state. Here it is.
This court's cases in a variety of contexts have said that race-based remedies are permissible for a period of time, sometimes for a long period of time, decades, in some cases, but that they should not be indefinite and should have an endpoint.
Can I get your response to that? Because this is very common thinking that the U.S. is at the end of the road when it comes to taking race into account in public life.
Quite the contrary. We're not at the end of it at all. In fact, in some cases, we've gone backwards. So yeah, in a perfect world, we should not have to have these remedies. We shouldn't have to have Section 2 to deal with discrimination. But we know that in 2026, discrimination not only is alive and well, it has been resuscitated by this president who seems to think that creating hate speak and to create further divisions among people is what a president should do. Mr. President, no, that is not what you should do. You should unify. So when I listen to Justice Kavanaugh, he makes a very good point. There should come a day when it isn't necessary. Respectfully, that day is not now. It's not even close.
What do you think the on-the-ground ramifications would be if, in Louisiana, for example, it got rid of its second majority black congressional district?
It's far bigger than the seats in Louisiana. Of course, the math is the math, and we have reapportionment every 10 years to take into account the demographic shifts. So when you see those shifts that change, that's why we have reapportionment every 10 years. So if you do this mid-term reapportionment, one, you are defying what was just done during a legislative session that was controlled by a Republican House, Republican Senate, Republican governor, and we passed a seat that's reflective of Louisiana. If you repeal that, you threaten not only the rule of law and the constitutionality, you threaten the balance of our country as it relates to the demographics of the individual states.
I want to ask you also about Justice Kavanaugh and what have become known as Kavanaugh stops, referring to the legal justification that ethnicity or how people speak could be considered a relevant factor by ICE in immigration stops. And now we're seeing this play out in videos around the country. What is your concern here?
Well, you know, I had before our Committee on Homeland Security, Secretary Noem came before us and I asked the question, what does an immigrant look like? What does an immigrant sound like? What does a documented versus undocumented person look or sound like? No one at the table could answer that question for me. So then I asked the question, you're paying $50,000 bonuses to individuals to come and be ICE agents. What are you telling them to look for? How are you telling them to identify what a person looks like if they're undocumented? We know that our citizens come in all shapes and colors and sizes. We come in all sorts of accents. We look in all certain ways. So to unilaterally just walk down the hall and pick people based on what you think is a very violation in and of itself. This issue of dealing with undocumented individuals is a very complex one, not one that you can unilaterally walk around and listen for accents or look at the color of someone's skin to determine if they're brown, perhaps they shouldn't be here. That isn't the way our country works. This is America. We're not some third world country. So if the president really wants to root out the worst rather, the criminals, the rapists, the murderers, there's ways to do that. Coordinate with our local authorities.
Congressman, I want to ask you one more thing because it is Martin Luther King Day, and I think the legacy of many is of nonviolent protest. At the same time, that nonviolent protest was frequently met with violence. What do you look to from that period as you look at the news headlines today?
Well, you know, obviously, Dr. King made it very clear that nonviolence resistance is the way to go. And unfortunately, there will always be some people who are agitators who seek to go in another direction, and some are, in fact, goaded into going into another direction. The message is still clear that we must stand in a nonviolent way to defend and to stand up for the ideals of our country, to make sure that the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King is as real, that we all can work and live together, and we can stand against tyranny, those who would try to tear down our democracy, those who would try to roll back the clock on rights, whether it's healthcare, education, environmental justice, or on and on and on. We know that these things are at risk, and just as much as it was then as it is today, and we have to reboot, reform, and fight back, but in a peaceful way.
All right, coming up. First of all, thank you so much, Congressman. Appreciate your time. Thank you for being here on this holiday.